Yes.
Oh,
Hello, everybody. It's 2024 January, and this is our, episode of A Live to Work where we have our guest. So we're very pleased to be inviting somebody along today. So hello and welcome to A Live to Work. This is Tina.
and I'm Kate, and let's Jasmine introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Jasmine, and I operate a professional decluttering business.
Fabulous.
How incredible is that?
I know it's going to be really an excellent thing to talk about. So thanks for coming, Jasmine. Now, we always give people a lift to work in a particular type of transport. And I was thinking today, all our listeners and the three of us could jump in a Mini Cooper.
Oh, that's posh.
Reason being, they're quite compact. And I thought this would go along with the theme that sometimes we don't have all the space we might like to put everything in. So along those lines.
Are we old school Mini when you're like,
yes,
old school?
teeny one, yes. Hardly room for a 5-foot woman like me.
It's quite surprising how much you can fit into a Mini Cooper, actually. I have seen people put a whole table in the back of them because they're quite square, so that's quite helpful.
Oh, excellent, Jasmine. Well, there you go. So that's what we're all travelling in today. So, Jasmine, you live in Devon, and your proper full name is Jasmine Sleigh, isn't it? And you've got a book that you can tell us a little bit about, but also I think what I would call you a subject expert on looking after your possessions and thinking about your possessions in a different way. So we're just going to have a chat about that really and pick Jasmine's brains, Kate and I. And when you look at Jasmine's website, one of the things that like really strikes you is the first question she asks, which is asking yourself, why have I kept that? So there's some, for all of us, I think we could probably ask ourselves that question about something. Why have I kept this? And what is it serving me, or am I being sort of like?
Yeah. So Jasmine, tell us about you. Tell us about your business, how you got started.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, I mean it's been quite a journey. Now I wrote the book sort of 10 years into the business, and it gave me a chance to reflect, and with promoting the book it's obviously given me a chance to sort of really consider where I've come from with it, where I went from taking a bit of interest and a relative going, oh, you're really good at helping people move house and with stuff, and have you ever thought about doing it as a business? To basically, there's 5 of us in the team now. We are the most successful and prolific decluttering business in the Southwest. And yeah, I can hands on heart say, yeah, I spend 5 days a week, pretty much every week, dealing with people's belongings. Yeah, I've become a bit of an expert. But I started out because I had a chance to change career when my son was born, and wanted something that I could fit around him. That's where a lot of people go into professional decluttering. You can do it 10 till 2, that or whatever, work around school runs, that sort of thing. But very quickly, 2 things happened. One, I became a member of the Association of Professional Declutterers and Organisers UK. And being based down I'm in Exmouth, so sort of on a limb, I thought this may be not something that happens in Devon, something that happens in Manchester and London. This is where people have professional organisers, but they don't have them in Devon. And certainly for the first 5 or 6 years of my business, I had a lot of people going, what, that's an actual job? That you're doing this as an actual job? This isn't just a hobby. No, I'm doing this as an actual job. So I made contact with that professional body, and very early doors I was training new professional organisers, because I'd got quite a bit of expertise in hoarding. I don't like the word decluttering, don't like the word clutter. You've told this, but if you've read my book, I mention it so rarely. But I went to see the fire and rescue service very early into the business, and spoke to a manager there who'd been on site for a fire where there'd been a tragedy and a child had perished in the fire, and the grandparents were known to by the community to be hoarding. And he was very keen to find an empathic and helpful way to engage with people whose homes had become so full they'd become a full risk to them. So very, very early on, I ended up working with the fire service on home fire safety visits and seeing an awful lot of crisis homes and working with people in really vulnerable situations, which gave me obviously such, which meant that sort of when I went and worked in homes where they just wanted the garage cleared and they didn't have any particular attachments, but they wanted to go through things, it wasn't just clearance, it was so much more straightforward for me because I was already well practiced with people who found that they were emotionally attached to pretty much every item, and that the volumes in the homes were quite significantly overwhelming. So yeah, big journey. Thrilled to be doing something that I love doing and believe in sort of to my core. But yeah, and it's, now I'm busy. My son is now a teenager and, is quite used to me, making sure everything's in its proper place at home. But I really enjoy my work.
Oh,
I mean,
that's amazing.
so many questions coming out of what you said. Can I ask one, Kate, and then ask, leave one for you? I think it's a language one, really, and Kate and I are so interested as NLP practitioners in language and what it means to people, how powerful it is, and what you were saying about all those words that create a negative label, decluttering, clutter, hoarding, that they may result in people not seeking help. Is that your experience, Jasmine, around the language?
The language, and I think when I was reflecting on sitting down to write the book, I think the whole perception of not just the profession, but the process of decluttering. So, in the new year, we've got it'll be ladies magazines will be full of 100 things you must get rid of from your home right now, or the 50 things that you should own and no more, and it's, when I get asked for promotions, often it's, please give us your top 3 tips, please can you give us before and after pictures. And I was trying to work out why it didn't ring with what I do. And like you say, even the language, decluttering, like taking things out of your life, and it feels very threatening, and hoarding has got that, the word has got such connotations in terms of people being selfish and holding on. And actually it was far from what I was finding, is that so much of what I do is about permission from yourself, about having belongings and being in a place to let them go. You might have spent a lot of money on them, or somebody's given them to you, all those sort of layers that go with owning something. But also forgiveness, if we have let something go and we need it, 5 months down the line, just to go, well, I made good decisions at the time with the information I had at the time. And it's that sort of the power play, I think, is what really struck me about when people, I say this when I do talks, half the room will be like, you're crossing the threshold of my home over my dead body. They find even my presence quite threatening until they've heard me speak and they realize I'm respectful. Everything in your home is your belongings. I'm not going to prejudge what's going to stay and go. We just have to have a conversation about what power you think you have over what stays and goes. And other people are sort of, are quite fascinated by it, but from a sort of completely alien point of view, especially hoarding. People are, I can't, we watch the television programs, can't imagine living like that. But actually, we forget that there is a person there, and there's a person who's trying to cope. They are not trying to bring things in to penalize other people. They are doing something to soothe themselves. So yeah, a bit of understanding, a bit of unpacking, and like you say, those labels don't help us really in that regard.
So what's the most common reason that you found for people hoarding? Is there a common theme, or is it dependent on that individual?
I think I've been to so many homes now where there are so many factors in play. The biggest 2 are how full the home is and the person there, how attached they are to the belongings. So I've definitely been into homes that have been really full, and social services, for example, or housing team or a concerned family member will say they're hoarding, and you go in and you work with them and they're able to get rid of things quite quickly, for rehoming, donating, recycling, some stuff for waste and so on and so forth. They can work quite quickly. They've sort of circumstantially got themselves full in the home and a bit stuck, a bit overwhelmed.
I was going to say, is that because they feel overwhelmed with the sheer volume of stuff and don't know where to start? And obviously Tina and I, we've done a podcast on this before, and in the book I found so many recurring themes of things that we've talked about, and I could identify so much with what you'd written and the things that we say about mindset and stuff. Because you put in here as well, because I've written it all down, that sometimes the belongings have got a self-soothing effect.
That's exactly right. And I mean, I was really heartened hearing your other podcasts, and I would encourage anyone listening who hasn't listened to some of your back catalogue, there's some real crossover in terms of how the person feels about their home. I mean, from my perspective, it's the great marriage between the psychology of somebody starting to feel in control and seeing actual tangible changes. There's no job like it really in that regard. But the fundamental difference is where somebody is entrenched in their attachment to belonging. So I tell the story, don't I? That's why there's so many different stories in the book, and I wanted to do it focused on the individuals. Some people, they've just squeezed themselves into a corner because they've put their family first, and it's just about saying maybe you could put yourself first and have some extra space. To somebody else who was sifting through what had been on the stairs for a decade through their fingers to check there wasn't something important they were going to put in the bin, feels fundamentally different. When somebody's hoarding, it feels fundamentally different. There is usually great tragedy. It's usually some trauma. We don't always get to hear or understand what that is or unpack it. We're there just to help them get past some of those barriers so they can start getting their home back to a safe level. There's certainly a complete fear that the world will not help them. They have to provide absolutely everything for themselves. Is a common theme for people who've got such strong attachments to belongings.
And some of the sort of like the basic tenets of the strong feelings that drive most of our behaviors, I can hear them threading through what you said, Jasmine, saying, anger is often why we behave in a certain way. We don't realize we're angry. We think we're frustrated, but somewhere deep in us it's an angry feeling, or sadness, or guilt. Guilt about potentially keeping things and not being as tidy as we think we should based on whoever said that, and sort of guilt around all sorts of things. I remember helping a relative tidy up a room once that she wanted to use for a different purpose, and I said, can I go through these things? And she said, oh yeah, most of them will just be rubbish. And we found something. And I said, well, this is so beautiful. Look at this. She said, oh my gosh, that was when a friend and I went on a foreign trip. I only went away once with my best friend. And oh my gosh, I'd almost forgotten I had that. I said, oh, this is such a special thing. This should be somewhere you look at it every day and it gives you joy. And she said, yes, I don't know why I haven't got it out. So that was quite nice. That idea that amongst what she perceived to be a load of old rubbish that needed sorting was some really special things that needed a special place in her home. So you probably get both sides of that coin, isn't there? In amongst all of stuff will be special stuff.
It's got to be done so carefully, like you say. We tell a lovely story, don't we, about we'd had a busy day clearing an awful lot from a property, and because we're so careful, in the last sort of half hour we found something really special at the bottom of a cup that somebody had thought it was gone forever. And I think that's why I wanted to demystify what we do. The book was aimed to sort of say, what is it actually like having a professional declutterer in your home? What is it like, more significantly, having those conversations, like you say, those conversations about people's treasured belongings are so special and so important. And to understand that if you can work with someone who is championing your cause, so looking for lost things, looking for things that show something of the individual. I mean, I mentioned, don't I, the first story, discovering a piano which we didn't even know was in the room. I mean, obviously some of these homes are really, really full, so lots of people can't imagine there being a piano in a room and not being able to see it. But what was absolutely fantastic about that person persevering with a difficult process was the reward at the end was finding the piano. And when he played beautifully and we had that moment, that is what we do. That's what I was trying to explain. That is what we do. Those special moments where he could enjoy something that showed who he actually was and not be completely fixated on the fact that his home was so full we couldn't get into the front door when we first met him. So that revealing of people's history, of like you say, all things in balance. Of course, for those that we work with who find it really hard, we've got to slightly detach from what is special to what is just the general flotsam of life, and find a sort of curated way of navigating their sense of self without them feeling like it's all going to be thrown in the bin.
Yeah,
so brilliantly with that relative. That sounds very exciting.
It's remembering as well, isn't it, how brave these people are in the first place to open their door to you. I mean, if you think about it, how many times do you go around to somebody's house, or even yourself, and you go, "Oh, sorry about the state of the house," and we say it, don't we, without even thinking about it. So for these people that need your assistance and your help, how incredible. And I think, credit where credit's due, to be so self-aware and everything, that you can get in there and help. And even if it's some way, and you know as well as I do that our subconscious works whether we know it does or not. So even one small conversation with you, whether they listen to what you've got to say initially or not, little bits will sink in. So even if you can't get through the door, you have made such a difference at some point.
Exactly right. I mean, it's, in terms of the profession, it's the thing that I say early doors is that just remember, everyone who says, "Oh, I'd love to have you in your home," isn't going to be making the phone call. And that it is really brave for people to make that first phone call and have that conversation. We have lots of people who drop me a weekend email with, lots of information about their life and then very little information about what they actually tangibly want you to do. Because I think that's again what I wanted to explore in the book. It is fascinating that, people want to spend a lot of time apologizing first, and I have to say, stop apologizing. Let's just work out what we can do for you and what we can achieve for you. So yeah, it's getting across the threshold here is a privilege, and that's why obviously recruiting has been quite interesting. I've got 4 lovely ladies who work for me, and the APDO professional body, I would recommend, if anyone's looking for somebody, try and find an APDO registered person. Chances are they're very serious about what they do and haven't just got an unhealthy interest in people's cupboards, but just gives a bit of sense that you're in safe hands if you're going to get somebody in, and everything's confidential. I mean, obviously I say that in the context of having written a book, but I have said early doors, all those stories are an amalgamation of different people, and we've worked with thousands of people and their belongings. So we've kind of changed enough that people can't identify who they are, but certainly just knowing that you're in a safe pair of hands. It is fascinating that people who know me well now have stopped apologizing when I go around to their house.
Do you have a particular demographic of houses and homes that you go into? Is it an older generation or younger? And I only ask this because growing up, we've always had wood in the shed, because you never know when that piece of wood is going to become useful. But that's, and I think that's a generational thing, isn't it, that's come on down. So do you find that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we reflected on as a team is that in one working week, we can be working in a vast range of homes with a vast range of people, in terms of, multi-million-pound farmhouse one day and a static caravan the next. You know, what unites us is it's stuff playing a role in causing the problem, in causing a challenge for the person in the home. But certainly most of our clients tend to be over the age of 45, 50. And of course, what we've got down here in Devon is a sort of different demographic thing again, in a different factor, which is we have got more space. So homes can have quite a considerable volume before, maybe not if you're living in the centre of Exeter, maybe, but in a flat, but we have got more space. So one of the stats that I give when I'm doing my sort of light-hearted talk on decluttering is the volume is about a third of people in this country have got enough clutter to fill a spare room. Now, when I put this out in the quiz, lots of people say they reckon it's 90% of the population have got enough unwanted stuff that they could fill a spare room. And I dare say that's something fairly unique to those over the age of 50 and in Devon, because we've got space to perhaps put extra things, maybe, but certainly, but more crucially than the fact that we've had quite a lot of life where we've accumulated, is that key point, isn't it, that lots of podcasts are talking about now, with, like, you know, that sort of midlife point being a changing point in identity and that sort of thing, is that is the age where people start to inherit perhaps belongings of family who've passed away. It's maybe when children have left home, they're starting to look at all the items that children have had in their home, you know, they've had in their home for raising children. It can be a chapter change for people starting to think, okay, I'm not a parent, or I'm starting to think about retirement from work. What do I want? I certainly get plenty of private calls where somebody says, it's my home, I now know I can decide what's going to happen here, I want to start doing things. And that's quite a significant chapter change for them. But the trigger points can be different for each person, but certainly it tends to be over sort of 45, 50, where people start looking around and going,
yeah,
I need to do something different for me.
I mean, listening to you say that, actually, it really makes me think about this, about attachment. And you've used that words a few times, haven't you, Jasmine? And I think, so for example, if you're gifted a lot of things from a relative who's no longer with you, I think you can have that fear/guilt around, like, should I not keep hold of this? Because, you know, would it be disrespectful? I think, you know, you had a whole range of feelings around that. And then with your children's things, I think there is that fear of moving on. So we in an episode, Kate and I were talking about you know, empty nest syndrome, which we don't like that phrase either, when people fledge off the end of the branch to their adult life, and you are in a different place in your own life. You're still a parent, but you're actively being a parent in a completely different way, and therefore it feels interesting to let go of things that are of their childhood, because, you know, what are you saying about that period in their lives? And, you know, so I think there are so many feelings, aren't they? It's completely understandable that we are attached to things. And just want to say one more thing, which is, I was reading something about memories the other day, and that, you know, we all think memories are real, but they're not really. They are recreated every single time we revisit them. And that's why you can have an event, and in a family, people go, oh, don't you remember Uncle George did this? And the other person's going, no, I don't remember it like that, because we recreate it every time. But for many people, I think memories are very important to us, but equally, possessions, items often trigger memories, which trigger feelings. And they're so powerful in our lives, aren't they? So you can completely see, I think, why it's an issue for many, many of us to let things go, actually.
But
Absolutely.
So just with that, how come letting go is easier for some and not others? Is there a reason, or is it just circumstance?
There are so many reasons, and I mean, there's so much what Tina said there that really was really fascinating. That, yeah, like you say, for some people, I mentioned it in the book that my husband's family, so my in-laws, are absolutely fantastic. Got a really good memory for every single event that's happened in their whole journey as a family. I can't remember sometimes what I did last week, but they really remember things and really treasured those things. What I say in there is just because with a belonging, you remember the memory, that who gave it to you, the circumstance, doesn't actually mean that it plays a role in your narrative going forward. So I think sometimes people with really neat as a pin recall can find it harder to let things go, because they think, because I remember who gave me this and where it came from, therefore it must be a significant memory. But actually it might just be that you're really good at remembering stuff like that. For some of us who are a bit more light touch and hardly remember things like that, not because we don't care, just that we're a little bit more sort of our brains are not wired that way, it can be easier to let things go. But certainly every home is so unique that what I say is we're trying to curate the memories. So, for example, we all need to be getting our dementia box together to make sure we've got access to tangible memories, photographs in a manageable sort of setup, so that we can access those memories. We're all about access to the actual things. If, for example, and I mentioned this, we know people whose lofts are completely full of every single item that their child played with, drew on, created, every single item that mum made, knitted, touched, had in their home. If you keep everything, then nothing is special. And all that happens is a generation ahead doesn't know what was special to you and doesn't, or what was just circumstantially put up in the loft, and therefore if they've got no attachment, everything goes. So it's definitely a movement to say sifting and sorting and distilling it down to what you can access yourself and enjoy. I've put all my photos now into photo books, and I was quite harsh about which ones made the cut. I've kept all the originals in a box, I have to say. But the idea of having a massive bookcase full of many, many, many albums, I felt was a little bit overwhelming. Was overwhelming for me. I wanted distilled set of memories that I could go through each year and look at and see. And the same goes for keepsakes. And then there's the right time to do it. That is, sifting through all the baby grows when my son was 2 is not the right time to do it. He's now 14. I have done it. Obviously, I've done it since then. But there's a right time to be. Sometimes it's good to sift, because if you're already in that, when kids are young, you can pass stuff on to people and you're in that sort of zone. I don't know people who've got babies anymore, so but sometimes the memories, you do have to leave it a certain amount of time, and that varies from person to person. But when they can go, right, I'm okay to look through mum's stuff now. I can do it. I feel like I can decide on some special things, and I can let the other things go.
That's such an important thing, Jasmine, I think, for everyone to hear, actually.
Yeah, and I love what you say about the dementia box, because obviously Tina and I are both healthcare professionals and deal with or have interaction with either patients or relatives of people with cognitive decline, and we all know there's such a push to get that individual back to some form of remembering of who they are and things, to almost bring them back into the world. So it's so important. I loved that.
And another thing it made me think about is sometimes I work as a celebrant, so I get involved in people's funerals, and what's quite telling is what people do and don't know about the person who's passed. And so sometimes you feel like, wouldn't it be great if we all took a little bit more opportunity to hear the life stories of our elders? because you know, we only get a snapshot of their lives, and often it's events like that. People go, oh, I didn't realise she was a, you know, did that in the war, it was a land girl. Oh, I didn't realise that, you know, she used to dance at the ballet, that kind of thing. And so just giving people opportunity to sometimes talk. And I think memory boxes and those kind of things are great triggers for those conversations, because sitting with a young person in your life and just going through some of that is such a lovely mutual moment. It's just a magical thing. So yeah, the sharing of the important bits of our lives is such a nice thing to do, Jasmine. I can see how that would apply in that way as well, actually, what you said.
I think when we say to concerned family members when they're embarking with sorting, yeah, having a nice special box, not perhaps an ugly plastic box, but a nice pretty box that you know, so we're going to put the special things in, we're going to find them across the house if they're not out on display, and talk about them and have permission to talk about them and share those memories is a really special thing to do. Certainly it's a strategy as well when homes are overwhelmed, is to have that special box available straight away, so they know when they do find something that's particular, important, it goes into a safe space. So it kind of starts to loosen their shoulders about letting something go accidentally. People who find it really hard are people who will not give themselves an easy time if they let go of something that they might need further down the line, or that was a memory. So it's just saying we're going to try and defend against that by putting things in this special box. But all of us need to be doing it, because as you said, it's not just when we have cognitive decline, which it's coming to most of us eventually, but also any health issue or any sort of chapter change that starts to question your sense of who you are and your identity. Having something that just reminds you of some good stuff that you've done. And that's another thing, you know, creating your own set of memories. You don't have to keep anything necessarily that is not a good memory. You know, I've certainly worked with people where that's been a tricky conversation to have. Yes, it happened to you. Do you want to be reminded about it? No. Do you need to keep the item that reminds you about it then? So again, it's just finding that narrative that suits you and keeping those special things, so you can keep reminding yourself when life sends its curveballs. And just as a small aside, this is the line that I always say to people: there's not much that we have control over in our lives, but we do have a say about what happens to our stuff. And so the sense of control of regularly engaging with our belongings and making small incremental changes it's got great mental health benefits, really.
Yeah, you have put in your book, and I love this, it's you don't need things to tell you who you are. I love that. And another thing was, nothing is immovable when we've got the ability to make decisions. And because that's it sometimes, isn't it, when you just feel stuck in a place with no decision, no choice. But we always have a choice. There is always choice. So actually, when you recognize that, then you can start to make change. Love it.
Oh, bless you. I mean, I think that regular practicing of, I mean, you know, I'm involved in big sorts where people have to, you know, have left it 20, 30 years and then they're sorting out. We recently worked with somebody who'd moved in only about 7 years before, but had brought a lot of boxes that probably come from a previous house as well. And while we were having such a joyful time finding the great things in there, I was like, I wish you'd done that. You know, this person was in their 80s. I wish you'd done this years ago. But keeping practice with sorting out our belongings and treating it as a regular, I mean, you know, we know about tidying up, we know about keeping things clean, but actually making regular decisions about whether something needs to be in our home or not just keeps us sort of stretching that muscle that says, I can have a say about what's in my home and what isn't in my home. I definitely meet people, obviously, who get very excited about what I do because they like to get rid of things the moment they're, you know, not touched for 3 weeks. And again, there's a balancing act, isn't there, about being practical about it as well, and being at ease with what's in your home. But certainly,
what advice would you give to create that sustainable improvement, whether it be to somebody who doesn't necessarily have a lot of stuff, to the other end of the spectrum where you can't move for things? You know, what's the basis on that behavioural change to keep it sustainable?
I suppose I would go back to that point, that a reflection about what we actually, so just removing ourselves from the idea of the stuff around us. What is it that we want? What do we want our lives to look like? What do we want to do? I mean, obviously when I'm working, it's sort of a practical thing where I go in and they say, oh, I really love to do my sewing, but I haven't got a space to do my sewing. So this is what we focus on. We've got to clear some space, let some things go that aren't to do with sewing, so we can create so it's deciding. I say this right in the conclusion, don't I? It's belongings are great. Have as many belongings as you like, as long as they are helping you in your life and not causing you a problem. For some people who hoard, the letting go is going to be more problematic than if it just stayed there, but the physical challenge on their well-being is starting to creep up, you know, start to win in terms of the need to look after themselves. But certainly having to think about our lives and what we want to achieve, and then looking around our homes and saying, is my home helping me do that? Are the things that I own helping me do the things that I want to do? And as I say at the start, but so many of us think the moment that something's come in our home, it just deserves to be there. For whatever reason it's come into the home, it has a power of its own. But actually we have the power to say, I don't think I need, or I don't think I need all my books. So I'm going to use books, and nobody likes getting rid of books. But just asking the question doesn't mean about not having anything necessarily, but things that are going to be helpful and useful for me and living my life the way that I want to live it.
Sorry, Tina, I'm asking all the questions. Honestly, I'm so interested. I'm like practically leaning into the laptop. I'm sorry. Oh, everybody. Tina, carry on. Apologies.
No, it was just a thought about what you were saying, Jasmine, really, because it's a great reframe. Because I remember when my daughter was younger and she'd gone through the phase of a certain type of toy, fluffy toys, you know, and she had her favourites, but there were others. But she was at an age where keeping them seemed important. So we talked about, you know, which were the best ones, which were the favorite ones. And what really helped was, what about if the idea of gifting and passing on? And I think a lot of us really enjoy helping others in the world. So the idea of taking things to charity or gifting things to a friend's child who's, well, she's younger than you now, and you're in a different place, aren't you? You're a bit older and you might like different toys. So that worked best in that situation. So I think for some of us, I really enjoy dropping things off at the charity shop. It gives me a really warm, fuzzy feeling, and I do it regularly because I've got in a pattern of sifting myself, you know. And I remember it all started in 1 January where I thought, instead of having one of those kind of New Year's resolutions that's about changing, you know, myself physically, I'm going to do something with my space, because I'd like to have more, you know, have more sight of my books and be able to read. So I had a certain little ambition. So yeah, those reframes, what we call them, I think that they're really useful, aren't they? And the idea of moving things on so others can have is a nice feeling.
I absolutely am so glad you've mentioned that, Tina, because I would have been kicking myself if I'd not mentioned it at the end. That I mean, certainly there is a historical position from my point of view. I was raised in a single parent family. I remember with joy when the neighbour used to turn up with a bag of clothes. She's still a dear friend of mine. Their daughter was 10 years older than me, and they used to turn up with a bag of clothes that they'd sorted out. And I mean, the things I used to wear, but I absolutely was so thrilled with receiving those things. So the kindness of receiving things from other people when I was young has stayed with me. And also that knowledge that if I wanted something else, I needed to sort of trade it in for something I already had. So that stayed with me politically, I suppose, with a small p. I genuinely have a sense that we can do our bit, be it a small bit of sharing the wealth that we've got with others. And certainly at this time, we know that though it's great that people can sell stuff on Vinted, and so that the charities are supporting the people who are going to feel the pinch so much harsher than any of us can imagine. And like you say, the warm and fuzzy feeling, actually, those in the hierarchy of needs, that psychological feedback you get from giving to others is really great for us, let alone being great for the community. And certainly with my son, teaching him that, as you have said, that prioritization, that I don't need something, I have an abundance. Actually, we've got an abundance of things, even if we feel the pinch, we've still got an abundance of things, really. How we can pass those on so they might benefit others is a really great lesson in life. And so and gives you that sort of, again, it's a practice of the fact that I don't have to have everything here with me, that those things can be doing good, but be out there in the world doing something else and having a life doing something else.
Yeah, brilliant.
We add as well, don't we, on stuff, a numerical value. So, for example, in my cupboards, just there, I have got 4 cupboards full of material ready to sew things, and I've had them in my cupboards for 2 years. But the material cost me a lot of money, so I'm like, I don't really want to get rid of it, because one day I'm going to make stuff. But actually, I haven't used it and the money's gone, and it doesn't matter what I do, I will never recoup it back. So it's it's allowing yourself.
Yep. Is that permission and forgiveness again, isn't it? Is the
Yeah.
And again, sometimes if it's up there and it's not causing any difficulty, maybe by year 4, maybe you will use it. And I think you'll be reassured that I can say that out loud. I mean, I've been to houses with an awful lot of fabric. So, but certainly, by the time you come to use it, actually, perhaps half of it won't appeal to you as it did maybe 4 years ago, because things move on, don't they, in terms of what we enjoy. It becomes a problem if, for example, the trade-off would be when somebody tries to get some more storage to store things that they're not so, that they brought in, and then it, economically it makes no sense. Or if there was pressure on the space to be used for something else, then it's a trade-off. You're exactly right, though. People do have that sort of, and especially when people are feeling the pinch, that sort of sense of, can I recoup some value from this? More importantly, I pay good money for it, I should just hold on to it as irrespective. But actually, just having those conversations about, what do I need the space for? Can I pare it down so it's a manageable amount that doesn't make me feel overwhelmed and I've got 4 projects to do rather than 25 projects to do? That's such a personal discussion, which is why when we get all these articles that say the 100 things that you should have in your home, or people say to me, how many black trousers should I own? I'm like, that's going to be completely bespoke to the person, isn't it? I mean, some of us only need a couple, some of us might need several pairs. There's no number, there is just what it's doing for the person, and whether they can see that actually when they start talking through how many pairs of black trousers they wear or what fabric they're going to use, that actually they already have the answer. They just needed to look at it and have a review and a see.
Yeah.
And there will be listeners who have got friends or relatives and in a hoarding situation. How should they wish to? How would they approach the subject? Can they broach the subject with the person? Because you do walk into some people's houses and it's just lots of stuff everywhere. Is it a discussion that is easy with that family member or friend, or how would you go about it? Because I know that there'll be people going out there going, oh my God, that's my friend X. I want to help them, how can they do that?
Yeah, I mean, I get calls every week, so I know that there are people out there who are worried about a family member or friends. I mean, a couple of resources I can point people to as well, but certainly I hope by listening to this, they've got a sense that, you know, asking about the person and what they want to do, as opposed to fixating on the actual stuff, is quite useful. And actually that the people are wrapping themselves in comfort. So the idea of just losing everything or somebody fiddling with their stuff is going to feel quite threatening. So to broach the subject of what they want, you know, what the person wants to achieve in their life, there are things they want to do, but they're finding that things are in the way, or, you know, to start on a positive note. I always say that it's always good to offer to do a review or organize. Don't say I'm coming in to help you clear or declutter. That's language, as you mentioned. It's just about the language of you stay in control. You're staying in control of the process, but can I help you just, you know, move stuff around if you want it moved around? Take a little look at the spare room or your bedroom, and or, you know, whatever space it is, and just get things how you want them to be. It's that language of, you know, not bringing in what needs to go just yet, because some of us find it very easy to put stuff in the recycling. I have no trouble, but lots of people do find it really difficult to imagine it. There are some brilliant resources out there. I point people obviously to my website as well, Change Your Space. There's some articles on there. There's some other sort of more specialist podcasts that I've spoken on as well about chronic disorganisation and hoarding, if that's useful. I would point people towards Hoarding Disorders UK and some of the charitable organisations out there that have resources there. One of the most helpful resources they've got on there is what's known as an icebreaker, which is a form that you can take, that the person can take to their GP, because some people say, I feel overwhelmed at home. And I've certainly been to a home, and excuse me being really glib that this is an extreme example. They went, oh, my cupboard is a nightmare. And they opened it up and there was only like a small box with a few tools in there or something. And I had to stop myself from nearly laughing, because obviously when I'm used to seeing cupboards, they are full to the top, absolutely crammed. But you know, everyone's idea of overwhelm is different, but this icebreaker does give a real idea about where people are and whether they are starting to be in a home that's a real risk to them. So I'd point people towards that resource, but just remembering, as I said at the start, there's a person there first who has gathered those things in to give them comfort. So just to tread really carefully.
I love that, and I think it, you know, probably coming to the end of our podcast now, but I feel that idea that runs through all of our lives, that be kind whenever possible, and it's always possible, and that's obviously a Dalai Lama quote, but I love it because, you know, there's times in our lives when we live in our own world and we see things our way, and we look at others in their worlds and we're like, how can you do that? I would never live in that situation. And we bring a lot of judgment to it. But if we start from that place of, you know, kindness, where, you know, you don't look comfortable sat on the edge of that chair because there's lots of things on the sofa, can you know, and I used to love sitting on the sofa with you. So can we find a way to do that? You know, it's so much kinder, isn't it, than look at all this mess. I think sometimes we do with family members, you know, we kind of feel we need to cut to the chase on these things. So I love the way that you expressed it, Jasmine. Thank you.
Well, listeners, I don't know about you, I proper enjoyed that, Jasmine. Thank you so much, because it just offers such an insight into the world of other people, things that you may not necessarily have thought about. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's very kind.
Listeners, you're all going to be at it now, aren't you? Looking at your cupboards, going, "Oh, I get messages going, Kate, you do not need all that material. What is in your cupboard right there?
Yeah, even sorting out your work bag, even, I was thinking as you were chatting. So we've arrived. The Mini Cooper is pulling up to the curb, and it's time for us all to get out. But what we will definitely do is pop all of Jasmine's information in the show notes, so you'll be able to see where her website is and her book. You can get from Waterstones and from Amazon, all the usual places. So we'll put all those links in for you, Jasmine, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. The book, by the way, is called Being Owned: A Decade in Professional Decluttering.
Perfect. Thank you. Take care, everyone, and enjoy your dealing with your belongings, as they say.
Bye.
Bye.